Okay, so welcome to this Zoom discussion on contemporary Icelandic literature. I'm Sverrir Norland, I'm an Icelandic writer, and I'll be moderating this. With me today are three distinctive Icelandic writers: Kristín Ómarsdóttir, she's a poet and a novelist, also an illustrator; Ragnar Helgi Ólafsson, who is a poet and short story writer and essayist, and also a sometimes book publisher and book designer, as well as a visual artist; and then Bergþóra Snæbjörnsdóttir, who's a poet and a novelist. The theme today is Icelandic literature, which I guess we could interpret as books written today in Icelandic. And I thought it would be interesting to start by thinking about what that really means to us, Icelandic literature. And so if I begin on a personal note, when I was growing up, Icelandic literature was really not something that I was very interested in. And it wasn't really until I sort of rediscovered it through foreign literature, you know, when I started reading writers from other places, and I lived abroad, and that was sort of my gateway back into Icelandic writers. I sort of realized that the writers that had grown up in my country had often probably discovered the same writers and were sort of in a bigger conversation with the whole world, not only my little sort of sometimes gloomy island. So that was sort of how I came to terms with being an Icelandic writer. So Kristín, when I think about your writing, it's very Icelandic in the way that you play with the language a lot, and in many ways it's probably a challenge to translate you. So yeah, and you have a sort of international I don't know, flair. I don't know what would be the right word. How do you see yourself? Are you an Icelandic writer, or is it? Do you ever think on those terms?
No, I think it's like the same as with gender. I don't put my nationality or my gender or my existential something and. Identity, and I always have trouble with this word. I don't understand this word identity, so I don't I've never thought of me like as a especially Icelandic or especially woman or especially something, you know. I just like feel more of a like a animal or you know, or a person, you know.
I love that association with gender and nationality. It's like,
yeah, but and you know, like, you know, the pieces they put in your passport, your how many, how high you are, the color of your eyes, M or F, or you know, Icelandic citizen or something like that. So, and I'm against borders, so so you know, I don't. Yeah, so.
But I guess.
But then of course I speak and write in Icelandic, so I'm an Icelandic writer, of course, and I'm also very I think very you know, I think the language itself control so much in. So you know, the language itself control my writing, you know. Sometimes I feel that the words are just like the masters, you know, the engineer that, you know, run the business, you know, or that runs the street. And you
mean the words dictate the things that you say and write, and the story.
That's why I'm especially a lot. I'm just an Icelandic writer.
Yeah, and so maybe the language, that's the borders that we sort of live inside.
Yeah, but I like, I'm happy inside of my language. I'm totally content inside this garden of Icelandic language.
So maybe what makes us Icelandic writers is the love we have for the language.
Yeah, but I think also the language, I mean, I think the language is yeah, it's like a human being in itself. It's a person in itself. I think. Yeah, but I don't know. I don't want to use the word love because I'm afraid of it in every sense. So I don't think I'm not a lover of the language. I think no.
Okay, you love the words, but you're highly skeptical of their meaning.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I love the words, but I really like it here. I really like it here.
Okay.
You know, in the Spartan. And I like, and I like how this language can create all this literature, all these books that I'm reading in Icelandic. And
Bergþóra, can I shoot a question at you now?
So can you tell me what was the question again?
I haven't phrased the question yet. So we're of the same generation, but I know that I grew up in Reykjavik, the capital city, but you did not, right?
No, definitely
and not. You, could you tell us where you grew up?
So I grew up on a farm. My father is a horse breeder. So I grew up on a farm about an hour away from Reykjavik.
Not very far, but still quite
not very far.
Yeah. And so what I was thinking, as it relates contemporary Icelandic literature, is that I feel that a lot of books that are written now in Icelandic and then get translated are often written expecting translation. You know what I mean? So it's sort of stories that can be translated. For example, the crime novels.
Yeah,
where
definitely.
People have names that can be pronounced in other languages. Then we have the sort of typical epic about a fisherman in the 19th century or something, things people would expect. And other things, of course. But what I thought was very interesting in your novel, Svínshöfuð, you could translate as pighead, I guess.
Pighead, yeah, it doesn't translate super well, but
no, it sounds very nice in Icelandic. That there you're really telling a very Icelandic story in a way. You're talking about immigrants and people that usually don't Icelandic people usually don't have a voice in Icelandic literature. And it really struck me that these are very Icelandic stories that are not commonly narrated in contemporary Icelandic stories or fiction, at least. So I'm wondering, was that something that just came to you, or is that something you deliberately tried to do, or?
So you mean if I sat down and thought, okay, so here's a group that isn't really represented, let's try and write something, or?
I'm sort of assuming you didn't do that.
No, yeah.
No, but it's interesting, I guess the reason that novel is so fresh and resonated with a bunch of people is that it was, really filling a gap somehow.
Thank you. I was really terrified when I was writing it because I was afraid that it was because it's quite dramatic, and I'm really terrified of being dramatic ever since I was a kid and was told don't be so dramatic, I guess. I found it a bit scary to be writing something that was in the countryside in Iceland and yada yada. But I think, I don't know, it wasn't something that I decided beforehand, or and I wasn't aware that it was I mean just now hearing from you that you thought it was a new take is really wonderful to hear, but I yeah, not something I maybe was aware of myself until
I would say this, it portrays a type of Iceland that I don't think the tourist industry would necessarily, promote. It's very dreary and harsh, in the past.
Yeah.
Then, what happens in the sort of contemporary moment.
Yeah, I think I think people like, when you're writing, and I didn't really know what I was going to write, but I found the need, like, because when you're writing, you have this way. It's like a door in a way. It's like a door you can open where you can know everything, and in life you don't get access to people in that way. Like, you can't see their thoughts or their personality traits on the outside, or their feelings they have on the inside, and their fragility. And so for me, because I think maybe because I find people quite complex, and I'm a little bit scared of them, maybe, in a way. Like, I find social situations very uncomfortable, quite often, at least. Writing is a way of, like, trying to understand people, and I don't think it was, and I felt this need to explain maybe why they were doing these, like, shameful, terrible things that they did, like, to try and understand it myself, even though and not to, like, not to turn my back on them, even though I didn't like what they were doing or how they were thinking. So it wasn't, I don't know if it's particularly, I think, Icelandic, maybe because I grew up with, these men around me, that I come through a little bit, quite a lot in the book.
You mean men that resemble Svínsöfið?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, just like...
I think what I was sort of getting at is that I feel like a lot of Icelandic writers, I guess, just grow up in the city and they tell stories that are set in Reykjavik, but they could be set in Copenhagen.
Yeah, international in a way, yeah.
We don't have this experience very often.
No. I mean, I think I think these type of people that are in the novel are, like, everywhere. It's just like if they grew up on an island or in the countryside somewhere in Iceland, or if they grew up maybe in the countryside somewhere in Poland or somewhere else, maybe doesn't matter so much. But,
Ragnar, how's your coffee? Oh, you just, your sound is off.
Það unmute í horninu vinstra megin. Svona mikrofon, já.
Jo, det är mycket gott. The coffee is very good. I can't believe that I'm the only one that came. Oh no, Bergþóra, you are prepared also. Tea.
Are you joking? I'm
it's only Kristín.
Kristín has coffee too.
Oh, the water. Yes.
No, because I drank so much coffee this morning.
Yes, but
it's only mad people that drink water, as Laxness.
I would feel too terrified to sit here without coffee, but I even made a sort of smoothie before I sat down.
Okay.
I was hoping, Ragnar, I don't know if if you have anything to read, but it would be nice to hear a few words in Icelandic, maybe?
I forgot about that, but wait a minute.
I forgot about it. That's why I picked you for that.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, wait a minute.
I want it to be a spontaneous decision. I don't want you to think too much.
Yes, I will read you a blues song.
Okay, that sounds great.
Ekkert póstkort enn. Vinkona mín í Bútan með allt mitt sparifé. Hugmyndin að hún kaupi fyrir okkar beggja hönd kofa í afskekktum dal. Þetta timburkofi með blikkþaki. Hann stendur í miðri fjallshlíð sem vaxin djúpgrænu mittisháu kjarri. Ef maður stendur upp sér maður vel til allra átta en ef maður leggst niður þá hverfur maður. Í rökum skugganum undir óhefluðum fjölunum í vöröndinni heyri ég bjöllurnar skríða yfir rotnandi laufblöð, þær eru blá, svartar og gljáandi. Í dalbotninum á, engin vegur. Vinkona mín og ég munum aldrei verið í kofanum á sama tíma, því kofinn rúmar einungis eitthvað einn mann, eina konu, eitthvað. Vinkona mín og ég ætlum að kaupa lítinn timburkofa í Bútan. Hann með blikkþaki og stendur í miðri fjallshlíð sem vaxin mittisháu, djúpgrænu kjarri. Vinkona mín í Bútan með allt mitt sparifé. Það sitt ekki nógu hratt. You got that, right?
I think you found the perfect tempo.
Thank
you. You wrote this book not too long ago. That's called My Dad's Library, or the Library of My Father, if you want to make it sound more literary.
Yeah.
I was very moved by, as you know, and it's sort of ridiculous that I'm telling you what the book is about, but I sort of have to say what it's about a little bit. So after your father passed away, you had to go through his library and decide what to keep and what to throw away.
Mm-hmm.
And as you did that, you go through all these old books that he had collected, the sort of, I guess, belong to a literary genre that sort of is dying or fading out.
Yeah.
Which we call, in Icelandic, Þjóðlegur fróðleikur.
Local lore or something like local history.
It's so Icelandic that it's kind of hard to translate even.
Yeah. It doesn't really exist anywhere else. Kind of not in that one.
And what makes the book so moving, I guess, is that this kind of local lore or whatever really belongs to the book format. And it's hard to, transfer it into technological world or it sits really uneasily in this moment, I guess.
Yeah.
And also, the Icelandic language is often really beautiful and at its best, I think, in this kind of old local lore.
Absolutely.
And so, and then there's this poem of yours that I recite in the introduction where you say, and I'm rephrasing that, at some point in the future there won't be anyone anymore because everyone will have gone on vacation to the past.
Mm-hmm.
And I love this idea because I think it's something that a lot of writers feel. We don't necessarily think everything was better in the past, but just writing is sort of the opposite end of technology. Technology is always thinking of the future, but writing is always using our imagination and our memory to create something from what's already happened.
Yeah. Well, I come from that issue kind of from a slightly different angle, since when I started doing visual art 20 some years ago, the only kind of art I wanted to do was art using technology, using computers and programming and stuff like that, which has historically been frowned upon by art. Artists are by definition almost anti-technological. I think the problem for writers is it's also problematic there because the book is a technological thing. Yeah, and so even the job of the writer is almost something that flows from Gutenberg's invention, in a way, technological invention. So it's like many things. It's rather complicated. There is a slight tendency towards nostalgia, I think, within all the arts. But that's also because there is satanic connection between nostalgia and melancholy.
But that's so interesting, though, that you never told me this, that the art you wanted to make was mainly focused on technology. And then,
yeah. That's what I did for the first 10 years of my artistic career.
Then you write this book about your father, who was a book publisher and a book collector.
Yeah.
You're also a writer. So do you think that was a sort of reaction, or like, were you rebelling against that?
No, it's never rebellion for me. It's always just new ways of admitting defeat, you know. It's like always, I'm just always being vanquished by my own projects, you know. It's like when you hit the final dead end of technological art, you sit down, you cry a bit, and then you start writing poetry, because it's the most absolute defeat you can admit to technological art, you know, because it's completely ridiculous.
That reminds me, I think there was this the Spanish writer, what's his name? Javier Marias. He says somewhere that being a writer is awful. It's a horrible, you know, condition.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's still better than anything else.
Yes. Yeah, it's like
it's very often.
Yeah.
And so, if I can go back to you, Kristín, now with because Ragnar mentioned the defeat. And I often think about this if you're set out to write a book in Icelandic and you're not writing an international crime novel, you have very modest expectations, I guess, of the readership and the sort of, you know, overall success, at least in terms of, I don't know, financial gain. And there, for me, there's something very beautiful about that. There's like, art is made because you have to, but entertainment is made in order to, you know, just make money. So I've often thought about this. Why do we persist on writing in Icelandic, telling our little stories?
I really don't know. It's hard to say, and yeah.
It just,
I don't know what to suggest. Maybe it's not like you know, I started writing as a rather young person, and I was not I choose the most unprofitable genre I could, you know, and I was very poor also for many years, poor and still without any safety, you know, like no safety for next year or you know. So, but then again, I'm also against all this. I'm against practical. I've always been against practical thinking.
Isn't safety an illusion anyway? I mean.
Yeah, and I don't like practical. I never liked it. So, so maybe that's why. But also, and I think also Ragnar and Bergþóra, and you can tell the same story, that when you're a teenager, it's like the language is like takes you somehow, you know, away from, takes you away, and you know, when you start like writing poetry as a teenager, something happens. It's like,
that's even more real than the real world you're escaping.
Yeah,
it's for me. And so recently you published this beautiful book. It's a collection of your poetry, your first 8 poetry books. And there's something that, I mean, even from the very beginning, you sort of have the same tone that you still preserve. And there's also this kind of playfulness with words. It's almost like you think about words differently than a lot of people. Like they're there and you take them and you sort of just I don't know, play with them, but at the same time, you're often very political. It's not that, you know, it's like the play adds sometimes seriousness to what you're saying. So I'm very curious, and maybe you can't answer this, but do you see words first and foremost as toys?
Yeah, it could be. I think maybe you're right. I think, yes, I do.
Yeah. Maybe everything we do.
And and because Ragnar and Bergþóra, they have also, both of them works in visual artists, so I think they know this sense also. Mm-hmm. But now I was also thinking, like, because I started writing in Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher era, maybe that it made me, you know, so against like everything practical.
Yeah.
And everything, you know, finance, you know, individualism and financing. Everybody was starting to study financial science and things like that. So.
What is deemed practical, I guess, is what you mean.
Yeah.
I think it's practical to play with words. Or it can be.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so, Bergþóra, back to you. I feel like I'm sort of I'm hosting a TV shows with different like covering the whole country. So what's the status in the Westfjords? But I also think that's I was thinking, I know you've also lived abroad, and I keep thinking about this sort of, because I was really struggling with the term Icelandic contemporary literature.
Yeah.
Because I really don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And if I may add, and if I may brag a little bit, for the first time in my life, I have a sort of steady home. So I brought all my books here and had a bookcase built. And
it looks very nice. I was very impressed.
That's why I'm sitting here, and I just want to point out that, doesn't it give me a certain authority?
I think you look intelligent with all these books behind you.
Yeah, I thought I needed that. So
you look like a traitor. To me, you look like a traitor.
Yeah. And just looking at my books, I mean, they're just, you know, from all over the world, and so the writers who've influenced me, some of them are Icelandic and most of them don't, and I don't really separate, you know. So just curious, what is your like relationship with influences and
is it like Icelandic contemporary literature?
Yeah, or just in general with literature, you know.
Yeah, I think I'm the same, and it's what Kristín also said. You don't really think about like nationality or like, oh, this is a new Icelandic writer, I should definitely, or you know, but
at the same time, that's always how books and literature is presented.
Yeah, and it's because it's a small community in a way also, so you're interested, but I mean, I read a lot of foreign authors. Always like nowadays, especially I think after you know, since I grew up as a young adult and until now, I've been reading a lot of foreign authors also. Since I had children, most of my reading happens in the dark on like a Kindle, so like talking about traders, and I hated it all the time because I was like, oh, you know, I like the feel of the paper, and now I love it because I can just like buy but it's actually not great for my bank account because you know, I keep buying books. But I think it's actually like really, it gives me a lot of freedom. Although, you know, I'm sponsoring Amazon, which is not like so wonderful. I'm not very like not being a good consumer in that sense. But when I was when I was a child, I was really heavily influenced by Icelandic authors and female authors, actually, like I realized. Or as a teenager, when I was 11 years old, I think I was 11 or 12, I actually got a poetry book a collection of poetry by Kristín as a Christmas present, which I had requested. And then I started writing like Kristín for like 2 years or something when I was 13. And then Guðrún Ómarsdóttir published a collection of short stories when she was like 19 or 20 or something. And I was really impressed because I thought, there's a woman and she's just a few years older than me and she's writing short stories. And so I started writing short stories like Guðrún Ómarsdóttir for a few years. And then it was really, where everybody had like gray eyes that looked like kaiva. What's kaiva? Pate. Yeah. And I would give it to boyfriends, like, you have to read this book, and I would like write like like some how you'd make like a mixtape for somebody you liked, and then I would like.
Did they read it? Yeah,
one guy. And then one guy did. But most of them were like living in Selfoss and like getting into bar fights, and one guy gave me his like a tissue paper with his blood in from his first fight, and so he didn't read the book. And I broke up with him after I got the tissue. But so I think I've been very heavily influenced by like female role models, and especially, yeah.
Do you still have the tissue with the blood on it?
No, I think I threw it away, which was a shame because he'd been keeping it for years. So it was actually like, I was just like 16 or something. So, but still, I feel a little bit bad about it.
Can I ask you to read a little bit if you have anything?
Yeah. I also forgot about it, so I have to go and get the book from the.
Up on the spot, did you?
Yeah. So pate, colored eyes. Or maybe you want me to do it later when I can get it when somebody else is talking. It's up to you.
Yeah, maybe Kristín, do you feel like then reading something now?
Yeah, no, but I forgot about it. So we should maybe go together.
Yeah, okay, Kristín. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Yeah.
And so it's just you and I?
Just the two of us now.
Yeah. What are you working on at the moment, if anything?
I have a book of poetry I'm kind of wrestling with. I don't know what or if it will be finished, but it's very voluminous, many hundred pages. So obviously not a very practical book of poetry.
That sounds pretty good.
No, it just sounds good because it's strange, but it's not necessarily good.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, if it's okay. I mean, it sounds horrifying too if it's
yes.
many hundreds of pages. But my phone was ringing and I had to look because my wife is due to have our baby any moment now.
Oh wow!
Okay,
so
yeah,
you run off
right.
and you're reading, reciting a book or something. You just keep going, and
yeah.
Okay, Bergþóra. Oh.
Okay, I'm just gonna like.
You wanna tell us about the book you're reading from?
Oh yeah, so this is I guess a collection of poetry that are like connected. I don't know. Yeah, kind of a novella, maybe a little bit, but yeah. So it's called Florida. Yeah, and so I'm gonna read now the page that I just opened, which is something I've never read because I would never choose this myself. So maybe this is a good opportunity. Já. Hvað ef næsti dagur og allir dagar eftir það renna mér úr greipum? Hvað ef ég geym ekki servíettuna sem þér voruð að snýta yður í, herr Fleischer? Hvað ef það springur æði í höfði yðar eftir að servíettan endar í ruslinu? Verður það mér að kenna? Verður það mér að kenna?
Very much. Kristín, is it different from you writing poetry or novels?
Yes, totally.
Totally different.
Mm-hmm.
Did you like eat a different breakfast before you?
Always eat the same.
You always eat the same breakfast?
Always.
Are you still eating the porridge that I...
Sometimes I do that, sometimes.
Well, then it's not always the same breakfast.
No, but yeah.
Okay. Can we hear a poem from you?
Yeah, I do like Bergþóra. I do just like...
Yeah.
And it's from a book, Köngulær, Spiders in... Yeah, Köngulær í Hringleikluggum, Spiders in Displays Window. And it was published same year as Florida, so we sometimes read, I think, together.
Yeah.
I remember that. When I heard you reading for the first time, it was in a bar, and I was totally mesmerized by your reading. So now I take, here. Flótti. Fyrrverandi drengur eða núverandi leikbrúða kjafta sig inn í hóp sem enginn stakk upp í gulli, klinki, himinbleikri tólg, við rötum þangað tilviljunina kennt saman inn á rústrauða göngudeild, bjöllu ómar í lofti, kling, 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 við komi brúðunar, leggja orðin tafarlaust á flótta heilu setningarnar, en nærvera hennar deyfir hungrið og ég læti mig sleiki útum.
Very nice, thank you. So I'm going to broaden the discussion a little bit. And Ragnar.
Yeah.
Do you remember when you first started writing? What is your first memory of writing? You don't?
No, not really. I mean, I just, writing short stories or something for, at school or something, just like when I was a kid. And then writing also in high school and stuff like that. And then kind of writing took a bit of a backseat. I mean, for me, I studied philosophy for many years, and basically philosophy for me is a study of language. And but when I was working in visual art, I kind of put writing really to the side. And it wasn't until somebody pointed out to me that the titles of my pieces were always getting longer and longer and longer. that I thought, well, maybe I should check out writing again. And,
no, you're more of a writer than an artist, or it doesn't matter?
Yes, well, I like the freedom of being
versatile,
a visual artist who does some writing, and a writer that sometimes does visual art. I think there's a freedom that comes with it. So,
do you think you would be a better person or a worse person if you had lived your life without art?
I mean, way beyond good and evil, so I wouldn't know how to start to answer that question.
Okay.
So I don't know what it means.
Bergþóra, are you working on something new now?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can't talk about it?
No. I'm working on something, but it's really like at this like postponing stage where I just push it away and I don't really. But I'm gonna start taking out my listamannalaun stipend, artist stipend on the 1st of September. So then I have to really get going.
Isn't postponing maybe just good? That means you're thinking, or?
Yeah, and it's also like, maybe it's helpful in a way. I think like I was quite comforted when I was complaining about this to a friend, and she said, well, you know, you're just doing research. Life is research. And then I was like, oh, great. Yeah, I'm doing research right now. So, yeah, no, but I'm super like, life is super hectic at the moment because I have a baby and I have a 5-year-old, and my partner is working in the countryside. And so I just like pass out every night until they start waking, which is like at midnight. So, yeah.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
And Kristín, are you working on something that you want to?
Yeah, I'm working on something, but I think it's too early to talk about.
Yeah, no one wants to talk about it.
No, yeah.
Well, I wished I was sitting with you in the sun in Slovenia, but I guess that wasn't in the cards for us this time. But it's been very fun talking to you. Do you have any questions for me? No, I'm just joking.
Are you working on something now?
Yes.
No, I'm just going to the swimming pool to have a child.
Yeah.
Well, I'm actually publishing a book in the spring. So yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And your wife, is she on the maternity ward still yet, or you know?
No, she's actually out picking my daughter up from school and walking maybe more than she should be. So I'm a little on edge that we'll need to run off soon. But
when is the due date, or has it already passed?
25th. No, so but I think she will be a little early this time.
Okay. Yeah.
So Leo.
Yeah. Congratulations. Til hamingju.
Muscle toe.
But it's that fascinating thing of trying to sort of weave writing, which at least for me takes a sort of quiet state of mind, together with having kids around you and all these kind of obligations.
Do you think writing demands a quiet state of mind?
Maybe at least just some peace and quiet to be able to sit down without quiet
life, like, maybe. Practically.
Not even quiet life, just like a corner where nobody's bothering you for 5 seconds or something. Or,
No, but not necessarily a quiet state of mind. I mean,
no, I guess not. No, and I've also trained this skill of like when I was finishing this book, I would just like have 5 minutes and then it's gone. And afterwards, I'm exhausted.
Yeah. But it's also like somebody said, Elizabeth Jökuls told me when I was trying to write Picard that I found it so difficult, and she was like, yeah, but it's like takeoff and landing is always the most difficult, kind of.
Yeah.
So, especially takeoff.
I guess once you're in the flow, even if it's just a few minutes a day or whatever, but you know what you need to get done. That's getting back there again, really hard.
But I think, I mean, just listening to your questions today, Sverrir, I think you're still, neck deep in your book. Your book is you're speaking your book like in every.
Well, you haven't read it yet.
I know, but I know you, so I know what it's about because I've been speaking to you, every once in a while in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
And I mean, like how your questions have over and over again zeroed in on the question of language and locality, and international writing, local writing.
Yeah. So is it a novel about a writer?
It's not a novel. It's a sort of essay.
Okay.
It's about technology and nature and how the effect that the technology is and the destruction of nature is having on our imagination and our feeling. So but that's interesting. But that's also something that I think about a lot, is that we write and read in order to become who we are. And so every time we're talking through what we're trying to resolve in our writing or reading or whatever.
I know. It's
so I'm trying to ask you questions that are sort of based on who I take you to be, but still I'm wrestling with my own questions.
It's like the most humiliating moments when you realize you're quoting yourself. When somebody's speaking to you and you quote your own poem, too, or basically without realizing it, you're actually speaking what you've already written is speaking through you again, literally.
Yeah.
I don't think that has ever happened to me yet, maybe, but yeah.
I don't know.
You just wait.
I've said things to my wife.
It's early days.
I've said things like, as I grapple with in my new book.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
But
no, but in a way, I mean, this is what writing is, what is beautiful about writing is you're creating your own inner, or cultivating your own inner dialogue also at the same time, you're cultivating what is growing inside of you.
Yeah.
And so that you kind of speak a sentence from your own work is normal, and it's also in a way beautiful. It means that there's growth happening, and there's
thought about it, hopefully.
And then also, because then also you get these weird, from the same element, you get this weird moments where things happen to you that you've written about or something. It's like where basically it feels like your writing is kind of creating reality, and you're really thinking about calling the guys in the white coats, because you're starting to it really feels that what you've written influences happen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the next level to kind of posting yourself, I guess. And it's both magnificent and horrifying.
That's also like extreme anxiety, kind of, where you think that if you think about something, it's going to happen. Like you think your child is going to die, and then you're going to make it happen. So you try to not think about it, and then it's worse or something.
It can also be some sort of form of insanity.
Actually,
I know what you mean.
I know a woman who had to write an obituary for her son. Her therapist made her write an obituary for her son because she was so sure that she was able to make him die with her thoughts. And so her therapist was like, okay, so let's just assume that he's dead. And now you write an obituary, and then let's see how that, and which I thought was really kind of a terrifying thing to do. But then that same therapist was also like, no, just think about, for a week, think about me being dead, and let's see if I drop dead. Which was also another experiment I would never do as a therapist myself, because you never know.
It's like you never know.
Yeah, and then you drop dead.
An interesting writing exercise too.
Yeah. Yeah, but I'm actually at the moment, because of COVID, I'm actually, my partner is a fisherman in Breiðafjörður, and I'm home with the kids, so it's back to 1940s, which was what I was writing about in Pighead. So I feel like the joke's on me.
Yeah.
Yes, I wouldn't write anything. Everything. I mean, I don't understand why Stephen King isn't that 10 times over already. But
Yeah. Maybe he's
accident, horrible accident he had.
He had a horrible accident. This is true.
Yeah, and I was saying maybe he's a clone or something.
Yeah.
How can one person be so productive?
Yeah.
Well, true. This has been lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck.
We'll enjoy the beautiful forests of Slovenia and the air and the hospitality of the people here.
Yeah. I was actually thinking that I made it happen, because when I got the invitation, I thought, oh, it really shouldn't because of global warming, and we should all be flying less, and it's kind of hypocritical of me. And then,
Thank you very much, Bergþóra.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you for making that happen.
I have superpowers with my mind, except when it comes to money and,
Yes.
So I don't know what happens now. Do we turn this off, or do we just cut?
I think we say goodbye.
Yeah, we leave.
And everybody stands up and leaves.
Yeah.
Hörru, við sjáumst.
Bye bye.
Okay.